everyone, and we are so excited to close down this amazing conference with a showcase of the incredible work happening in Arkansas. Governor Sanders, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And I can't believe this many people hung around to hear me. They must know you're on the front row, Governor.
So I was at your inauguration, and I don't know, but I swear you walked off stage and you said, let's get down to business on education. Like, that must be the case because things moved so quickly. So I just want to start with hearing why you chose to prioritize this issue. We love a good education governor, but there are a lot of issues that you could have taken up at the get-go.
Well, there are a handful of reasons, and certainly this was one of the biggest priorities. I spent 2 years campaigning all over the state of Arkansas and made very clear that education was going to be my top priority. The reason it's so important is because it impacts everything else that we do. If we want safer communities and we want strong economies, we want to build a good workforce, it all ties back to education. So I knew that the most important thing I could do was focus on making sure every student in the state had access to a good quality education and helping provide different pathways and different opportunities. And we had the benefit of having a really long campaign cycle. Governor, as you know, that's not always a good thing, but because our campaign lasted so long, we spent a lot of time not just campaigning, but preparing for what we would do once elected. And so Keith Brooks is here on the front row, and Keith is a member of the Arkansas State Legislature, but also was one of the champions and the sponsor in the House of Arkansas Learns. Keith, will you stand up, because without Keith and his counterpart in the Senate and the team that worked on this piece of legislation long before the election ever took place, we wouldn't have been able to get as much done as we were able to. I also got really good advice from some people who had been in my shoes before that told me that this is your honeymoon period. People will never be more excited that you're governor than those first few months, and after that the excitement will die off. That has happened. We're trying to keep it going as much as possible, but I knew that we needed to go as big as we possibly could, as fast as we possibly could, and so our goal was to put everything that we wanted to see in one piece of legislation. Having a really good team and really good leadership. Secretary Oliva has done a fabulous job. I looked around the country and I said, who's been leading on education? Who's done a great job? Florida was one of the people and states at the top of the list. So I said, let's go out and steal the top talent we can find. And Jacob was willing to move to Arkansas and building a really strong coalition and going for everything we could at the very beginning, I think was one of the reasons we were able to get it done, and something we're really proud of.
So you hit the ground running, the team hit the ground running, and that resulted in this landmark piece of legislation, the LEARNS Act, which I know some people in this room have read all 147 pages of it, 144 pages of it. Woohoo! To those who have read that. I know you could get pretty wonky, but in the name of time, tell us the main components. Just give us the headlines of some of the key areas that were really critical to you to have embedded in that legislation.
Sure. I'm curious, is there anybody that has read that piece of legislation not from Arkansas?
There are some hands in the back.
Okay. Yeah. Well, we'll find some hobbies for you later because clearly you need more to do. But there's so much packed into that, and so often there are only a couple of things that ever get any attention, that are ever talked about. But we're really proud of all 144 pages and what we think it is going to mean for Arkansas. I will go as quickly as possible for the sake of time. First and foremost, we know, and this group knows far better than I do, that one of the most important and biggest factors in determining whether a kid has a lifetime of success or a lifetime in poverty is whether or not they can read. It is a very basic, simple concept, but so many kids in America are struggling with this, particularly in Arkansas. On average, around 35% of our third graders in this country are hitting that basic benchmark. In Arkansas, it was only 31%. And so we knew that if we were going to see our kids be successful, this was a place we really had to lean into. One of the things that I think is so important for states is to look around and see who is doing it right. We don't have to reinvent the wheel on everything. And so that was an important thing for us, was looking and seeing who had had successful programs. This is really hard for me to admit, certainly publicly and in a large room, but Mississippi had actually been doing a lot of things right when it came to literacy. They went from being at the bottom of the pack with Arkansas to moving up, and now they've gone from 48th and 49th in the country. They're 22 in the country in a short amount of time. And so taking their successful program and including that as part of our LEARNS legislation was really critical. The big piece of that is putting literacy coaches in some of your hardest and struggling districts. So Arkansas has now hired just over 125 literacy coaches and deployed them to schools and districts around the state and giving students that individualized attention that they need. Certainly after we were already struggling with this area pre-COVID, but after COVID, we saw even bigger decline in literacy in Arkansas. So we had a lot of catch-up work to do. So making sure we had those skilled, qualified literacy coaches that could go into individual districts, we're already seeing the impact of that. One of the other things that we did in this space was high-impact tutoring grants that we offer both schools as well as individual students and families. And so really leaning into that and giving that foundation was critical for us. And I think we're going to see immediate results. If we don't, Jacob will be gladly passing out his resume to everyone in here. I'm only kidding. But he promises me that we are making progress. And so we know that we're already seeing the positive impact of having a strong literacy policy. Also, the training of our teachers. I know you told me to be quick, but this is something I'm really passionate about, so I'm trying hard to go as quickly as possible. But for so long, we actually didn't teach our teachers the right way to help our students. And now we're doing that on a statewide, large scale, and that's making a huge difference in the classroom. And so we're very proud of that. The other big piece of Arkansas LEARNS is the empowerment piece, and that is allowing parents the opportunity to decide where and how their kids will be educated. We have opened up school choice significantly. We went with a phased-in approach. Year one, we opened up school choice to our F-rated schools in the state, students entering kindergarten, and students that had learning disabilities and special needs challenges. Within the first year, we had over 5,000 students that enrolled in education freedom accounts, and over 50% of those students were students with special needs and learning challenges, which tells us a lot. Those were kids that desperately needed a different environment than the one they were in. Our most vulnerable students were getting the least amount of attention that they needed. So now these kids are being put on that great pathway. We're in year two right now, and we have about 15,000 students that have taken advantage of our education freedom accounts. Year two opened up to D-rated schools, students that have parents that are either active duty or former military, and our first responders and law enforcement. And that's something I'm really, really proud of, the fact the people who do the most for our state and our community are going to be some of the first recipients of that program. I'm going fast. Year 3, it's universal, and it will be next year, it will be open to every single student in the state of Arkansas, and every parent will have the ability to decide where their kid can best be educated. And I think that is going to be life-changing for so many students across the state of Arkansas.
Your remarks just show the incredible breadth, but also depth of the legislation and the policy work. But not just that, also the focus on implementation, on making sure that this is really trickling down to classroom level change. And I want to give us a chance to highlight some of the emerging success stories. One that's very exciting is that now, adjusted for cost of living, Arkansas has the highest starting teacher salaries in the country. Huge. Talk a little bit about why that was an important priority as you were sort of getting started in this work, and what you're hoping to see in terms of the future of the teacher workforce in Arkansas.
Sure. We know that if we want our students to be the best, then we have to make sure that we're able to recruit and retain top talent and keep our best educators in the front of the classroom. And so they have such a huge impact on whether or not we can pass all of the great policy legislation out there, but if we don't do a couple of things right, one, implementation is so key, but also having the right people in the front of the classroom to lead those students will have a real world impact. And so keeping our teachers, but also getting new people to jump into that profession was really important. Arkansas was 48th in the country pre the passage of LEARNS, and now even without the adjustment of cost of living, we're in the top 5, but when you adjust for cost of living, we now have the top starting teacher pay going from $36,000 to $50,000, but that wasn't the only place we wanted to focus. I didn't just want that starting teacher to get an increase, but we wanted to make sure that every single teacher in the state of Arkansas was rewarded for their hard work. And so it was important for us to include a raise for every teacher, got at least a $2,000 raise. There are a lot of other pieces that were part of it. We made sure that the funding that the state gives, 80% of that actually has to be used now to pay teachers. When that money goes to the district, so often it is moved around and used for a lot of other purposes. On average, Arkansas gives about $77,000 per teacher to each district, but a lot of that money wasn't trickling down to actually pay the teacher. Now 80% of that foundation funding that we're giving has to go to teacher salaries. So that was a big piece of what we wanted to see happen.
I want to highlight one other teacher support that was part of this, and that is the work that you have done and the team have done to support paid leave, paid family leave for teachers in the state of Arkansas. I was talking about this with 2 visionary legislators from Utah and South Miami, and this is a big issue for the teacher workforce. It's almost 80% female. Tell us about that work and why that was important to you.
So as a mom myself, I know how difficult sometimes it can be to find that work-life balance. In fact, that was the conversation I was having at my table right before I got up here. And in the world of work-life balance, my 12-year-old daughter is actually here with me today. And so we've learned that we have to combine the two very often. But for so many women, they have to make a decision on whether or not they're going to stay home with their kids, or or to have a family at all, or continue in their profession. And so we really wanted to look for ways to aid in keeping women in the professional workforce. And so we partnered with, and the state covers half of the cost, but if a district wants to opt in, and they'll pay for half and the state will pay for half, we'll go up to 12 weeks of paid maternity leave, making us one of the highest in the country for that.
Thank you so much for your leadership on that issue as someone passionate about education, but also a new mom of a 5-month-old. I want to talk a little bit, thank you. I want to talk a little bit more about the focus on literacy, and also just shout out Excel and Ed for making it so cool to talk about early literacy. Like, the energy around early literacy here is just so inspiring. So you talked a little bit about the coaches, Governor Sanders. I think they've now reached 45,000 educators statewide. What are the results you're hoping to see from that? That's a long-term investment.
You know, so many times, and I think Governor Bush would understand this very well, and I know there are a lot of elected officials in the room, but a lot of times we want things to happen in an election cycle. We want it to be very quick, and so you look for things that can be done fast. This isn't one of those things that's going to happen overnight. Now, I do expect that we will see some immediate increases in positive results, but I don't think the kind of transformational change that we're hoping for is going to be in our first year. But I do know that by already reaching over 45,000 students in our first year and a half of implementation, that's a big deal in a small state like Arkansas. That's a huge piece of the puzzle for us. And so continuing to build on that's going to be really important, but we have to be really committed. We can't just put this program in place, wait for it for a year, say, we're not at 80%, we're jumping ship. We have to keep our foot on the gas and really make sure there's good accountability within the program and that we're prepared for the long-term play. Looking for short-term wins is great, but in something like this, we have to know that it's going to take a little bit of time and know that we may not get to see all of the fruits of that labor, but it is going to make a huge difference, and we know it's going to work. We just have to be a little patient as it happens.
And it's so foundational.
It is.
So one of the things that we all know Governor Bush is known for is visiting tons of schools. Does your schedule as governor allow for that? Like, are you able to see some of these changes in action?
You know, it's one of my favorite things to do is go into a classroom. I have learned, though, that I'm a lot more popular in first grade than high school. And so
we'll get to that.
Yes. However, you'll be shocked. Some of the questions that the elementary kids ask are much harder than those of the high school. And so, you know, one of the things I love to do is go into the classroom. I was able to visit 2 schools just this week in Arkansas. Jacob goes with me a lot. I have found that I get a lot more popular. I created what is called a homework pass. And while we are certainly trying to encourage students to work more and do more, a little break every once in a while is not that bad. But I don't give them away for free. I make them earn them. And we ask trivia questions when we go into the classroom. And the first kid that raises their hand and gets it right gets a homework pass. Now, I did find out that getting permission from the principal before I give those out is also really important. I gave a few out. I'm not sure they were validated, but we've gotten a much better process in place. I've also seen that I have a reputation for asking Arkansas history-specific questions. So now a lot of kids are studying Arkansas history before I come in, which I love. But then I open it up and let them ask me questions, and I got stumped twice this week, so I may change my tactics a little bit. But it's really incredible to see that, and this is one of the things I love most about being governor, is that you get to be part of passing a bill, coming up with an idea, and then seeing it actually go into action. When we were working on Learns and we were doing a lot of the meetings with stakeholders and different things, I had the opportunity to meet a family, and I heard a story about a little boy named Jack. And I talked about this on the day that we signed Learns, because I said, now Jack is going to get to go to a school that his family has deemed will be the best place for him to learn. And when I signed that legislation, I told Jack's story. and what had happened to him. He had been in a school there in central Arkansas, and Jack has a learning disability and had really struggled to fit in the classroom environment that he was in. And he had been bullied and teased and picked on pretty relentlessly, so much to the point that after several days, Jack had endured so much bullying, and one of the kids made a comment, "We wish you would just run off and die." Jack didn't understand, and he took that literally. He left the school campus, he went off, went miles from the school, laid down, and they couldn't find him for a while. It took several hours before they could find and locate Jack. Thankfully they did, they brought him back, he was safe. But fast forward, and just a few months ago, I had the opportunity to go visit Jack's new school, and Jack gave me the tour of his school, and his classmates cheered for him. You know, there's nothing better than getting to meet the kids and the parents and the families and the teachers whose lives are changed because of the work that we're doing. You know, my dad was governor of Arkansas for almost 11 years, and my entire life I heard him say over and over and over again that being governor is the best job in the world. And I mean, if you asked him right now, he would still tell you to this day, being governor is the best job in the world. And fast forward, I get elected. I'm in the middle of my first session. We're fighting through various parts of the LEARNS bill. And I call my dad after a rough couple of meetings and hours. I said, "Dad, I had a question for you." He's like, "Sure." He goes, "You know how you have told me that being governor is the best job in the world?" He says, "Yes." I said, "When exactly will that start?" And my dad kind of laughed at me, and in a way that only a parent can, he said, "Well, Sarah, I hate to tell you this, but you haven't done anything yet." And I was thinking, seriously? I was like, that kind of hurts. I was calling him for encouragement. I actually feel worse. But he said, "No, let me explain." He said, "You're just now in the middle of your first session." He said, "But in a little bit, you're going to get this thing done, and you're going to sign one of the most transformative pieces of education legislation in our state's history. And then you're going to go out and you're going to be in communities where you get to see people at moments when you don't expect it. You're going to be at one of your kids' baseball games, or you're going to be at the grocery store or the gas station, and a mom is going to come up to you and tell you that because of the work that you have done, their kid is now thriving when they used to be struggling. That they can now do things that they never thought were possible because of the work you're doing." He said, "When you have that moment," he said, "you'll understand why it's the best job in the world." And now I get to experience that every day.
Well, shout out to the dads and the father figures for always putting us in our place.
Pretty good one, so.
So do I. We're lucky for that. I want to talk a little bit about your advocacy and activism on an issue that's deeply related to education, and that is youth mental health. And we can't really talk about education these days without talking about some of the challenges that young people are facing. The Walton Family Foundation has done a lot of research on Gen Z and Gen Alpha. And there's a lot of hope in this generation, but we also know that they're struggling, and school needs to be a place that supports them. You've partnered with Jonathan Haidt on a set of work in Arkansas to think about and pilot initiatives that are going to help kids focus, taking them off their phones, eliminating distractions. Why is that something you wanted to take a leadership stance on, and what is it looking like in Arkansas right now?
Well, this is not the most popular policy at my own house, Scarlett, cover your ears. But it's one of the things that I think is impacting our society in a way that, one, nobody saw coming, and frankly, no one was really talking about. Jonathan Haidt has brought so much awareness to this issue, and I love that you're giving credit for partnering. I don't know if he would see it that way. I just bought lots of copies of his book, and I mailed them to every single state legislator in Arkansas, as well as every governor in the country, with a letter saying, we need to take a look at this, we need to do more, we have to do better, because we are seeing the dramatic impact. If you look at every piece of data that is available, there's not a single one that will not tell you how dangerous it is for kids to have smartphones and unlimited access to social media. Our depression, our suicide, our anxiety rates have skyrocketed in the last 10 years. Classroom distraction and productivity has plummeted. Everything that we can see is showing that this is can be a detrimental impact on so many of our young people. While it can be a great tool and a very wonderful resource, and there's so much good technology that can help us in the classroom, unlimited access is really, I think, one of the most dangerous and having the biggest impact on our young people's mental health of anything in the country. Kids on average now are spending 4 to 5 minutes of unstructured play outside a day. 4 to 5 minutes. On the other hand, they're spending 5 to 6 hours on their phone. If you talk to a teacher in America right now where they don't have a phone-free school policy, they'll tell you how sad their hallways are. Because instead of the boisterous noise and activity you hear between classes, no one is speaking to each other because they're all looking down as they walk down the hallway. We started a pilot program that we launched in June of this year, expecting that we would have a handful of districts participate. The way our program was going to work, we put some money aside in individual districts. If they were willing to go phone-free, the state would cover the cost of the pouches or the lockers through a grant program. Within 6 weeks, 75% of school districts in the state of Arkansas voluntarily opted into that program. It tells you how desperate they are. I think what that tells you is just what a huge desire there is for change, and how desperate our schools, our administrators, and our principals and teachers are to have someone help and lead the way. We partnered with the University of Arkansas to do a study alongside our pilot program, and this is our first semester, so we're still waiting on the data and the results to see what that will look like. But we did have one school in Bentonville that had already been in the program and implemented a year prior to our pilot program. And within the first year, Bentonville School that had implemented this saw a 51% drop in access to drugs and drug usage in their school. They saw a 77% increase in productivity from their students. This is in 1 year, in one school going phone free. They have had just dramatic results and impact, and we expect that we're going to see that statewide through the pilot program, and hopeful that we can expand that and codify that in legislation as we move forward into our session next year. No pressure, but I have 2 members of the legislature that are in the House. I'm just making sure they're hearing that too.
Those early indicators are so exciting, and I'm also just really happy you mentioned the teacher perspective on this, because in my conversations, you know, teachers have just said how they want their jobs to be more sustainable. They want to be able to personalize instruction. They want to be able to do better, and having phones eliminated as a distraction in the equation of the complexity of a classroom is making a big difference. So exciting to hear about that, and maybe we'll be talking about that research study at a future conference. I want to shift gears a little bit as we're winding down here. What was your favorite subject in school?
Recess. I mean, if I'm being honest, I love to read. I love to consume information. So I have always enjoyed anything that allows me to read and take that in. Love history. I know this will come as a big shock. Social studies and civics were something I loved to do and was really passionate about as a student.
What are some of the lessons from parenthood that have kind of shaped your thinking on education? You've mentioned your daughter a couple of times, but you know, how did that personal experience, how does it translate in the LEARNS Act?
I think that the biggest thing for me is that I have 3 kids. And I have a 7th grader, a 5th grader, and a 3rd grader. And so I'm experiencing a lot of the things in real time. But one of the biggest takeaways for me is that as a parent of only 3 kids, I can see that each one of my kids learns differently and needs different things. And so you multiply that on the entire student population of our state, and I know that every kid is not going to learn the same, need the same things, or thrive in the same environment. And so we have to provide different pathways and different opportunities if we want our kids to be successful. And so as a parent, I can see that every single day, and that makes it easy to understand that we have to do that and have policy and legislation that reflects that in government.
If anyone can appreciate the complexity of what you are doing and your team is doing in Arkansas, I think it's a lot of the people in this room. But I'd love to wrap up with your advice, your call to action for folks in the room who want to take some of the early lessons learned from Arkansas, because as you're noting, there's a lot more to do and implementation kind of continues. But what advice do you have for folks?
I would say don't be afraid to go big. Go as big as you possibly can. Put everything out there. Don't be hesitant. Don't try to piecemeal it. Go really big. Go really bold. Make it hard for people to be against. One of the reasons LEARNS was successful is because we had a little bit of everything in there. And whether it was raising teacher pay, to universal school choice, to getting rid of CRT and indoctrination, to dual track diplomas, we put a little bit of everything in there, and it really gave us a strong coalition, and sometimes from very unlikely allies. And so that was, I think, one of the secrets to our success, was bringing a lot of players to the table, but also having evidence and data to back it up. We didn't just say, oh, we hope that this is like going to make a difference. We went out, we saw the best programs possible, we put it all into one piece of legislation, and we were unapologetic in pushing it forward and saying, we will accept nothing less. Our kids deserve better than what they're getting, and we're going to give it to them, and we're going all the way. And so my only advice is don't be afraid, and go as big as you possibly can, and charge boldly ahead, and I think you'll get the result that you want.
Well, thank you for leading by example, and this commitment to working across lines of difference, to building that coalition is so, so key. And I would just want to shout out your emphasis on teamwork in all of this. It takes a bold vision, and it takes leadership, and then it takes a whole lot of people working together to make it happen. Governor Sanders, thank you so much on behalf of the Walton Family Foundation for your amazing leadership.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me.